Now that we know how to add templates and how to render templates, I want to come back to why we actually pointed at challenges/challenge HTML. Why did I not place that HTML file directly in the templates folder instead of the nested challenges folder in there? We could have placed it in there. We could have skipped that extra challenges folder. We then would have to adjust this path here as well. But it is considered a best practice to repeat your app name in the templates folder, because if you have multiple apps in your project and these different apps might have similar template names, if you would have just a template named challenge HTML directly in the templates folder for the challenges app, if you then had another app which also has a challenge HTML file in its template folder, Django would not be able to tell these two templates apart. They have the same file name, and Django essentially just merges all template folders from all apps into one big template folder under the hood, you could say. And therefore, you would have similar file names for different apps, and Django would not be able to tell them apart. That's why it's a best practice to repeat the app name in the templates folder instead of the app folder. This is simply required to ensure that you never accidentally have clashing template file names across different apps. So that's something which matters. Now, besides that, there's one other thing I want to highlight here and which I actually want to improve. Currently, we're calling render_to_string to convert the template to a string. And then we send back that string as part of the HTTP response. There's nothing wrong with it, but this is such a common pattern that Django actually has a shortcut for that. And we're actually already importing that shortcut function by default here. If not, make sure you add this import to your views.py file where you import the render function from django.shortcuts. This render function can be used to replace render_to_string and sending back that response. So with it, we can get rid of the render_to_string import here and go down to this view function, and instead of having these two lines, we can actually just return render. So we return the result of calling render, and to render we pass that string, and that's it. So we can get rid of these two lines now, and that's simply a bit shorter and does the same thing as before. The only difference here is that we need to add a first argument in front of that template name, and that should be that request which we received. Up to this point, we haven't done much with that request, but the render function actually needs it, so that internally it can extract data from there. So if you use render, you must pass the request to it, and then as a second argument, that template path. And with that, if we save that, we can reload that April month, and of course we can also go back to the other months, and this all works, and we now successfully load that challenge. So that's all good. We now learned in depth how the templates generally work and how we can load them, how we make Django aware of them. But up to this point, these templates are not dynamic at all. Or this single template we have is not dynamic at all. It only contains hard-coded, static HTML code. And that's typically not what we want. Instead, typically, we want to have some hard-coded HTML code in there, but then we also have dynamic pieces. For example, we might want to output the name of the month and also the goal of the month. So therefore, that's what we're going to learn about next.